I now want to take a look at a basic fraction review. These are not things that should be new to you, but things that you should have already learned in your arithmetic class. The first thing I want to take a look at, as far as fractions are concerned, is how to simplify. Now, we have other lessons available on simplification, but just to basically take a quick look at simplification, the way it works, if you have a fraction that needs to be simplified, what that means is that there is something that can be divided out of both numerator and denominator. In the case of 3/27, both numerator and denominator can be divided by 3. And a fraction is considered not simplified if there's something that can be divided out and you fail to do that. So in this fraction, I divide 3 by 3 in the numerator and get a 1. I divide 27 by 3 in the denominator and get a 9. And 1/9 would be the simplified version of this fraction. Another example, if we look at 50/75, we see that actually a 25 is the largest thing that could be divided out, but if you were to happen to miss that, let's say we only noticed to start off with that a 5 could be divided out, we would end up with 10 over, and 75 divided by 5, that would go 15 times. So we notice that there is something else that can be pulled out, and actually it's another 5. And what we end up with is the same result we would have ended up with had we pulled out the 25 in the first place. So simplification actually can be done in a series of simplifying steps, but again the rule is divide numerator and denominator by the same value, and you're getting a more simplified version of the fraction. Now the next thing we need to look at is how to do a little bit of converting, because fractions can be written in several different forms. Now, the two fractions that we've worked with here so far are what's known as proper fractions. That means the numerator, the number on top, is smaller than the denominator. But an improper fraction, like 12/7, that means the numerator is larger than the denominator. That means the fraction is larger than 1. To convert 12/7, I'll simply do a little bit of long division. I'll take 12 and long divide by 7. 7 goes into 12 one time. 1 times 7 is 7. When you subtract, you get a 5. Now, in the past, we've written this as 5 as a remainder. But 12/7, when we're converting it to the other form, will become 1. And this 1 is actually the quotient. And the 5 will become the numerator, and 7 the denominator of your fraction, and this is now in a form called a mixed number. To look at another example of that, we'll take a 15/2, and again setting it up as a long division problem. 15 divided by 2. 2 goes into 15 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. You subtract, and this time our remainder is a 1. So 15/2 gets rewritten as a 7 1/2. And of course the conversion can go the other direction. If I had an 8 3/5, since division and subtraction is what gave us this conversion in the first place, then going back in the other direction, we will multiply followed by adding. So we say 5 times 8 is 40, plus 3 is a 43, and the original denominator was 5, so that's what it stays. So there is your review for simplification and for conversion. Now we need to look at a few other skills as far as working with fractions. And let's start with the easiest. And I believe for most people, they will find the easiest thing to do with a fraction is multiply. So let's take a look at that, and then we will look at division, and then we will take a quick review of addition and subtraction. Alright, now as far as multiplication is concerned, the rule says A over B when multiplied by C over D is equal to AC over BD. In other words, when you're multiplying two fractions, whether they are proper or improper, you multiply numerators by numerators, that's straight across the top, and denominators by denominators, that's straight across the bottom. So I can take 3/5 times 7/8 and say 3 times 7 is 21, 5 times 8 is 40. Okay? Very easily, straight across the top, straight across the bottom. And with multiplication you can also cross cancel. If I have a 7/9 being multiplied by a 3/21, I can say, for example, 3 divides out of 3 one time, and out of 9 3 times. 7 divides out of 7 one time, out of 21 3 times, and then multiply what's left. 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 3 is 9. Cross cancellation works only with fractions that are being multiplied, and only when you cancel from a numerator to a denominator, whether it's in the same fraction or within two different fractions. That's how the cross cancellation has to be performed. Of course, cross cancellation only works with proper and improper fractions because you can only multiply proper and improper fractions. If you had a mixed number, say 3 1/2 multiplied by 5 2/5, we would have to convert first. So in other words, 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. This is going to be a 7/2 times 5 times 5 is 25, and 2 more is a 27/5. So when we multiply this time, 2 times 5 is 10, and the 7 times 27, maybe we need some calculator help with that. We'll say 7 times 27, which is a 189. So this becomes a 189 over 10. I know that that is a reduced answer because there's nothing here that can be cross-canceled from any numerator to any denominator. There's nothing that can be done. Of course, this could be written as a mixed number, and if we wanted to do that, I could take the 189 and divide it by 10. 10 goes into 18 one time. There's your 10. The 8 comes down from subtraction, then you drop the 9. 10 goes into 89 8 times. 10 times 8 is an 80, and the remainder is a 9. So this is written as an 18 9/10. Again, a reduced answer. So there are the basics of multiplication. Let's look next at the rules for division. Get the paper clear. Alright, now division. The rules for division say that A over B when divided by C over D, that problem needs to be rewritten as A over B times D over C, which of course by the previous rule becomes AD over BC. In other words, a division problem like 3/5 divided by 9/10 has to be rewritten as 3/5. Note that the first fraction always stays exactly the same. The division is going to turn into multiplication, and the second fraction gets reciprocated. And now that it's a multiplication problem, I can say 3 goes into 3 one time, comes out of 9 3 times, 5 goes into 5 once, comes out of 10 twice, 2/3 is your reduced answer. Again, when mixed numbers get involved, say a 1 1/2 divided by 3 2/5, you're first going to convert. 1 1/2 becomes 3/2. We'll leave it division for a moment. 3 times 5 is 15, and 2 more, that's going to be a 17/5. Now we'll change. 3/2 stays 3/2. Division becomes multiplication, and the fraction that you're dividing by gets reciprocated. Now I can multiply, because there's no cross-canceling that can be done. 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 17 is 34. There's a reduced answer for you. So that's multiplication and division. Let's go on with our review and take a look at addition and subtraction. The rule for addition says that A over B plus C over B is A plus C over B, and the rule for subtraction is similar. A over B minus C over B is A minus C over B. In other words, you need to emphasize the fact that with addition and subtraction, you have to have this common denominator. So if I had a 3/5 plus a 7/5, our answer is going to have a denominator of 5, because that is the common denominator. 3 and 7 is 10, and of course 10/5 reduces to 2. If I had a 11/9 minus a 2/9, the denominator is going to be a 9. 11 minus 2 is 9, and again this one can reduce to a 1. And that basically is what you have to be able to add or subtract fractions, is that common denominator. Now if you don't have it, if I have a 3/7 plus a 2/14, I can't add at this point, because the 7 and the 14 are different denominators. What I have to figure out is what denominator could they both be rewritten as. And since 7 goes into 14, it's the one that will be rewritten. I like to step aside to rewrite my fractions. And just like previously with our simplification, we divided numerator and denominator. This time we will multiply. I'll multiply by 2, because 7 times 2 is what gives me 14. Multiplying by 2 on the bottom tells you that that's what needs to be done on top as well. So this problem is rewritten as 6/14 plus 2/14, which gives you 8/14, which can be reduced. And only now do you reduce once you have your final answer. I'm going to start off by dividing by 2. That gives me a 4/7, and that is a completely reduced answer to that problem. Alright, so again, with addition and subtraction, you have to have a common denominator, whether you're working with a mixed number, or a proper fraction, or an improper fraction. You have to have a common denominator before you can add and subtract. Now with your mixed numbers, it's done in approximately the same way. If I had a 5 3/8, and I was adding to that a 7 4/5, my common denominator would be a 40, because that's what both 8 and 5 can be converted into by multiplication. So my 3/8 needs to be rewritten first, times 5 on the bottom, times 5 on top. There it is, rewritten. So this becomes a 5 15/40 plus, now for the other one, 4/5 gets rewritten with its new denominator, times 8 on the bottom means times 8 on the top. And there it is. So this is a 7 32/40. So when I add, I get a 12, and 15 32 is going to give me a 47/40. Now here's one of the problems that you have with these mixed numbers, is you can't have 47/40. So 47/40 is actually a 1 7/40. So I put the 1 with the 12 so that it becomes a 13, and the 7/40 is the leftover fractional part. So there is a quick review of addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, as well as simplification. Now let's look at how some of these things can be done on the calculator. Okay, we'll clear what we had here before, and let's take a look at how the fractions work. First of all, the multiplication. If I wanted to multiply two fractions, I would need to use parentheses. So I will take left parenthesis and put, say, a 3 over, using the division symbol, gives me a fraction bar, a 5, there's a 3/5. Then now could be multiplied, say, by a 2/7. And what the calculator will give you every time is a decimal answer. Now once you have that decimal answer, you can hit the math button and hit enter once, twice, and it will give you a simplified fraction for your answer. So there's a multiplication problem for you. Let's look at a mixed number. Let's look at a 2, and for the fractional part we have to put a plus, 2 and 5/8, and we will multiply that by a 1 and, don't forget the plus, 1/2, and again we will get a decimal answer, which we can ask the calculator to turn into a fraction for us. And you're going to find that on this calculator you always get either proper or improper answers. You can force it to take in mixed numbers this way, but it will not give you a mixed number for an answer. Alright, so let's look at, real quickly, a multiplication. Let's take 8/9 and multiply it by, we're going to do a mixed number now, so I need a parenthesis, a 4 and, put in the plus, 2/5. That's 8/9 times 4 and 2/5. Again, a decimal answer that can be easily turned into a fraction. Alright, so there was the multiplication for you. Let's look at division quickly. Let's take a 4/7 and divide it by, and you'll get another fraction bar in between, a 1 and 3/7, and there's your decimal answer, which again is easy to convert into a fraction. And now let's look, there was multiplication, division, let's look at a subtraction problem. Let's take a 5 and 1/8 and subtract from it. Now note that even though this is a subtraction problem, inside the parentheses we still have a plus. We're going to subtract from 5 and 1/8 a 2, and notice we're still using an addition problem here because we're inside the parentheses defining a mixed number, a 2 and 4/5. And when we subtract, again a decimal answer, which can easily be turned into a fraction. So there's basically the way your calculator works with your addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, with your fractions, and also the basics of how it works when we're doing it by hand. So that concludes our fraction review, and you might want to look back over any material you have from previous arithmetic classes and make sure you do plenty of these exercises out of the textbook so you are up to date on how to do your fraction arithmetic.